Welcome to the speaker series on a shot glass of recovery. This podcast is a place for real stories, honest conversations, and recovery lived one day at a time. The views and opinions shared here are simply our own personal experiences. We do not speak for or represent Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole.
You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of your.
AA Solution Seekers would like to welcome one of our own, Double N Jen from AA Solution Seekers and the Beaches Home Group. Take it away, Jen.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Jen, alcoholic. Holy hell, it's weird. It's doing this for you guys, be my home group that I've been with for a year and a half now, but really happy to be here. My sober date is October 6, 2024. And today's, I just checked on my phone, is actually 575 days of sobriety. So what happened? One of the things I struggle with is that I didn't necessarily have a traumatic childhood. I came from a really good home for the most sense. My dad was an alcoholic, but I thought it was like a manageable sort of thing because he was super successful in his career and held a very high position at an accounting firm. And so I never really thought it was much of a problem. It was just how my dad was. But I know now that that definitely had an impact. But, I have a brother, grew up in Etobicoke, in the suburbs, and really had everything afforded to me that I could possibly want. My biggest thing when I was a child was horseback riding and show jumping. And I did that probably until I was about 15, when my show jumping career, what kind of career do you have at 15, ended. It was just not the environment that my parents could continue to afford anymore, given the level that I was riding at. And so I stopped and tried to become social and do all of the things. But I don't know if that had an impact on it or if at around that time, it was when my parents started fighting a lot more. But I never felt good in my own skin. I definitely remember having that feeling starting in my early teens, just not feeling comfortable with self. I know now that I have ADHD. That wasn't diagnosed at the time. I had a lot of anxiety. And so the reason I share this is because it does play a role in my story with alcoholism. But at 15, I started to struggle with anorexia. And I did that That disease had me really hooked under it for about 3 years. And I spent about 6 inpatient stays at sick kids during that time. And then finally aged into the system at 18. And I was terrified of a relapse. I was terrified of going back there and not being able to get the help that I was so frequently relying on at sick kids. It was much harder in the adult system. So it was around that time when I decided that drinking was going to be my answer. I was going to solve that by becoming really social. I felt as soon as I had the first drink with my friends that I just felt like myself. I felt comfortable in my skin. I felt like I could talk to people that I normally couldn't talk to. It really became what I realize now was just my best friend and tool that I started to use throughout my whole life. My parents ended up ultimately divorcing when I was about 18 and lived primarily with my mom, but was just still really, really not comfortable in my own skin. I was going out to bars, partying with my friends. I was always the drunkest person there, always. I didn't know that that was the problem. I didn't know back then that the reason I always was the drunkest was that once I have a drink, it takes me. And, that led to just partying nonstop, showing up at my part-time job, still with glitter on my body and probably still super drunk at 7:30 in the morning, things like that. And then I met my ex-husband when I was 20 and we were really young. And at that time, he seemed like the safe person. I'd had one relationship in high school that really, really impacted me. It was my first love, I guess you would call him, and somebody that I've been in touch with over the years and has played a role consistently in my life. But he had really broken me, and I found Sean, or my ex-husband, sorry. And I thought, perfect, let's move in within 6 months. I can get out of all of this chaos with living with my mom alone. Let's just grow up and be adults together. His parents had recently divorced, and we thought that we could create a home at a very young age that our parents couldn't offer us. So my 20s were spent with him. my drinking slowed down. It was definitely not something that was an everyday thing at all. I was really focused on my career. I was really focused on my career predominantly for the most part. And then as I proceeded to on in my career, it became really social. There was a lot more boozy lunches, boozy dinners, and I loved it. I was like, yes, I can drink and succeed in my career. This is really cool. I had like an expense card and all of these things, and I was probably only about 30 at the time. I had moved up quite quickly at the consulting firm I was with for about 13 years. And we ended up deciding to have a family. That was really, really difficult. And I think my drinking started to take a bit of a turning point then when I found out that my ex-husband actually can't have kids. We tried a number of different procedures, but were deemed at that point that he wasn't eligible for IVF and had an experimental surgery, and we were told that it didn't work. At that time, I wanted to go to counseling with him. I wanted to consider adoption with him. I just wanted to be a mom. And he said no. And so I left him for the first time. I sold our house. I moved into a condo downtown. About 6 months later, he decided that he was ready for counseling. And I had decided that, oh, there's nobody else out there for me in the dating world. I'm going to go back to Sean. He's who I know and love as a friend, at least, anyways, at that time. We were able to actually, we started the adoption process. And it turns out after a year of my ex-husband's surgery, we were able to use about 2 different procedures to have our son. And so we went through IVF a few times and then finally had my son, which was a miracle. Braden, my son, is just absolutely everything in the world to me. So obviously I didn't drink during my pregnancy. We were going through all of that. I was so like this, if God gives me a child, like this is a miracle. I don't want to do anything that could possibly alter this pregnancy, which is already high risk as it was. And so Braden was born. It was the happiest day of my life. And probably within about 2 weeks, I was drinking again and timing my breastfeedings. I remember going to a work Christmas party. So Braden was born at the end of October. I went probably early December, maybe 6 weeks post-pregnancy, and hammered, pumping and trying to do all of the things to time it all out. Alcohol was just something that I realized I needed. I thought I needed it. So then motherhood, I mean, it was amazing. I was close with all the moms in the neighborhood. We had a great family life, doing all of the things. He's in all the sports, all of the activities. And we decided to try for a second. And this is when my marriage shifted. We tried a couple of times through IVF and didn't. And then he made the decision to stop. And that was really hard for me because I hadn't yet accepted the fact that I would only be a mom to one. And he told me I was selfish, which fair to a degree, but my fantasy of a life of being a mom with 4 kids had totally disappeared from me. And that was really hard for me. And within like a week or 2 of me kind of feeling sorry for myself, he's like, enough, like, I can't deal with you. You need to get your shit together. You're being like a complete jerk. You have to focus on Braden, which is true. So I did. And I started to drink a lot more. Our relationship never really recovered from that. So my drinking looked like evenings where after Braden had gone to bed, I'm drinking a bottle of wine, working on my laptop, still doing all of the things. It was around this time when my son was a toddler that I made the decision to change from a consulting career. I'd been with the same firm for about 13 years, but was missing something. And that's a theme. I've always felt that I'm missing something, that myself isn't necessarily enough, that something else needs to be there. And for me, that meant doing charitable work. That was something that had become really prevalent in my personal life. And I decided to make the career shift and move into the not-for-profit sector. And so there was a pay cut there, but it was something that I was just so excited about. And I got an amazing position at now one of the most controversial charities in Canada, but at the time, one of the biggest. And, I was the global VP there for about 5 years. That role entailed a ton of traveling, really big experiences, being around celebrities, all of the things. I was gone a lot. And in the times when I was gone and when I was traveling and going to all of these events and galas and things like that, my drinking definitely escalated. At the same time, we were afforded a lot of opportunities to travel the world as a result of that job, which I'm really grateful for. But every single vacation we would go on as a family, there was always an argument about the fact that my drinking was too much, because it was never just 2 or 3 glasses of wine at a dinner. It was always just way, 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 way more. But I didn't think I had a problem because this is how I saw my dad. He was really successful in his career. I was following the same path. My dad was really proud of me. Him and I were closer than ever, which was really something that was hard for us to get to because there had been a lot of fighting between him and I during my teenage years as a result of both of our diseases, I would say. And becoming so close to my dad again meant everything. He was the person I leaned on for doing anything that needed fixing around the house. I would call him a couple times a week after work to talk about my day and get advice on everything. He was at all of my son's events and activities. And so on March 28th of, I guess it was 2008, I got a phone call from him that he was in the hospital and he had blood clots and they didn't know why, but he was having trouble breathing. And very shortly after that, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And literally a month to the day on April 28th of 2008, he died and passed away. I was really fortunate with my work at the time to be able to take that time off. He had chosen to pass away at my aunt's house. She lives in a house in Port Credit that's right on the lake, actually. And that's what he wanted. And so I spent every single day with him. And at this point, my son was being taken care of by my husband at the time. We didn't want him to see my dad the way he was all the time. I was just there taking care of grandpa. But I was staying with my aunt and my uncle. And I was like, what the hell? They don't really drink. What am I going to do? So that's when I decided that I was going to start buying cartons that were easy to hide and easy to get rid of and hide them and drink alone upstairs when my dad went to bed and I was staying at my aunt's. And I started to sneak it quite regularly to cope with what I was going through. And then once my dad passed away, it was probably similar, like about 2 weeks later, again, similar to the journey with our second IVF thing, where my ex-husband again told me that I was being selfish. He had lost both of his parents. He wasn't sulking around the house 2 weeks later, that I needed to get my shit together and be there for our son. And so I did. And I did that by drinking. I felt that, by this time, my ex-husband he was extremely controlling. He was very verbally abusive. I've shared this story a few times because it's the one that always pops to mind, but I'll never forget the time when Braden was young and my ex-husband was traveling to Seattle and it was cold in the house, but I wasn't allowed to have access to the thermostat. He controlled it all through his phone and it was freezing and I was calling him and asking him to turn up the heat. And he said that if he had a chance when he got back to the hotel, he would, even though he could have done it on his phone. There was lots of moments like that. He had financially pretty much ruined us by the time I left. I didn't realize how bad it was at the time. I now know that spitting on people is considered physical abuse. I didn't know that at the time. That was definitely his thing that he really loved to, do, just to remind me how stupid I was and what a piece of shit I was. And just that I was always just never doing enough for him, even though he didn't really work. He had his own business, but he didn't really do well because he has to interact with people and he's not very good at that. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He was really floundering in life and I was trying to do what was best for Braden and build this really amazing life for him. And the resentment was so, so bad. I didn't know that resentment is a silent killer, but it certainly was definitely what was causing me to drink. I just couldn't stand being around him. He wouldn't let me have access to my phone or talk to my friends. I would have to sit on the couch with him every night just watching TV, even though we wouldn't talk to each other. And I would go back and forth upstairs from the basement to go and sneak wine and to sneak booze and to try to make it through that night. I remember 4 years before I ended up leaving my ex-husband, I had said to one of my best friends at the time that I knew my marriage was over, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And I didn't know how to make it okay for Braden. And at that point, she looked at me and she said, divorcing my husband at the time is going to be very, very hard. She's like, I don't know anybody who is going to go through a more difficult divorce than you. You need to be ready for it. You need to be ready for what he's going to do. And I didn't think that could happen. And then there was then the pandemic hit. I had just literally the month before left the role that I was in. I wanted to find something new. I needed a break from that place. Luckily, I left when I did, but didn't expect to go into a global pandemic. And that was really hard because it was bringing out things in our relationship that my son was starting to see because we were all under the same house. So during that time, there was a number of incidents that happened where my son saw my ex-husband talking to me in a way that he shouldn't. And my son would start to console me and give me hugs and say things like, I'm sorry that daddy talks to you that way. And then I was driving home one day. We had a new puppy at the time, Wrigley, who I swear to God has saved my life. My son was playing a doubleheader for baseball, and I came back quickly to the house one day to let him out because he was too young to stay that long. And I remember looking 6 doors down the street, and there was a house that was up for lease. And I had seen this house up for lease 2 years before, and I had asked somebody about the price. Could I do it? And I just got scared and I didn't do it. And then I sat there in the car and I called my friend that I had talked to 4 years ago. And then I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get that house. Even though I wasn't working, I'm like, I'm going to pay ahead. I'm going to get this house. This is the way I can make it okay for Braden. We're staying on the same street with all of his best friends. This is the neighborhood he knows. I'm going to do it. And so I went inside, grabbed some wine, poured it into a travel cup, and went back to the baseball game. And I was like, now I've got some liquid courage. Like, I'm going to be good. And this wasn't uncommon. I was always hiding booze. I would go to Starbucks and get these like pink drink refreshers, and I would dump most of them out, but pour wine in them or vodka in them because it would still look pink and nobody would know that it was wine and things like that. So my drinking was pretty bad by then. And so I finally sat down and I told my ex-husband I was leaving, and I did. And my son was good for a while and I was good for a while. I was a raging alcoholic by then. There's no question about it, but I was in complete denial. My ex-husband would show me bottles of booze, like scotch and gin and things that we would have for when we were socializing that I never drank. And he would come to me in the mornings and be like, why is this half empty? I was sneaking booze all the time. It was the only way I could manage. And I thought my key to getting rid of all of my drinking was leaving my ex-husband, and then everything would be okay. And it was for a while. It was good probably until about 2022. And then the divorce got really, really bad. He was it was the pandemic. People were heightened. He was trying to get me to sign like a Google spreadsheets about my cleaning protocols. And I was like, no. And then he was saying that I didn't have strong enough ones. He was refusing Braden to come over because I was seeing somebody at the time. And he was worried that we weren't being safe about COVID, even though we were. So he was restricting my time with Braden. And I coped with it by drinking. I still wasn't working. It was the pandemic. I had nothing to do. And it was around that time when I discovered that Uber delivers wine. And that was not a good finding for me at all. It started from, having a couple of bottles here and there. I was definitely drinking every day by this point, but I wasn't drinking during the day yet. And, as the divorce got worse and worse, I did exactly what I said I wouldn't do. And I drank to cope with it. I became all of the things and more that he said that I was. You're going to fall apart. You're not good enough. You're such a disaster. You have, what is wrong with you? All of the things and all of the mental health issues I'd had over the years. One of the things I didn't mention was I had my first suicide attempt when I was 18. And that was right when I was just fairly quickly after I had stopped being an inpatient for my eating disorder. I had discovered booze, but I was just a disaster. And I felt like I can't live a life like this. And so I had tried very, very meekly to commit suicide. But it was around 2022 when I tried again. I felt like I was the person that my ex-husband said I was. I was a terrible mother. I was never going to get my shit together. I was just unlovable to the core. There was nothing good about me, and that I was causing more people problems in their lives than they needed. And it would be better if I was gone. And so I tried one night, and there was a lot of pills and obviously a ton of alcohol involved. And then I woke up in the morning and I was really pissed off. So I tried again. Somehow throughout the chaos, my mom, I guess I called her, I'm not sure. But anyways, I ended up in the hospital in the ICU for 3 days and then admitted for 2 weeks. And that was, I guess, the fall of 2022. Yeah, it would have been the fall of 2022. And I lied completely about my drinking. They told me my liver was a disaster. I said, no, you're wrong. It's just because I took too many pills. I'm fine. And they're like, no, you are clearly an alcoholic. And I said, I'm not, and I want to leave. And so I did. It was shortly around that time when I collected my first DUI. And then shortly thereafter, when I got my second one, because I had my license back in between my court dates and when my first original incident was. The shame of doing that as somebody, as a mother, as a human being, I could have killed people. I could have hurt myself. The life would have been shot, all of the things. But I did it. And I did it the same time, both times, the same reason. I was driving up north to my mom's to get away because I was having bad weeks, and I had a panic attack. And I thought that stopping halfway in Peterborough would be my solution at the LCBO. And I bought myself a bottle of wine and I poured it into my Starbucks cup. And I probably had already been drinking without realizing it during the day because I was just drinking all the time. And Luckily, on both occasions, I got pulled over. Nobody was hurt. But the shame of that as a human being, as a mother, as somebody in my professional career with my friends, my family, is something that I don't know that I can ever get over. But it's been almost 3 years and I'm looking forward to getting my license back. But as you can see, that didn't stop me because I kept drinking. We're only talking about 2003 here, and my sober date's 2024. So that didn't stop me. I still didn't have a problem. I had only abused it because I had panic attacks. I wasn't an actual alcoholic, even though I knew deep down to myself I was. So by this point, I was drinking every day, all day long, couldn't get a job. Oh no, I finally had got a job that I loved. I was doing well. I was there for about 2 years. And then this was, I guess, probably again around the same time, 2023. When I got laid off from that job. I was drinking heavily. I was sneaking drinks at work. When I would go into the office, I definitely would have a mug filled with wine during most of my calls. And this went on for about 2 years until I was let go. Now, the reason it was let go was that there was genuine restructuring that I supported with, and my role was not needed at the level that I was at, and I supported that decision. But the one thing that I will never forget on my call when I was getting let go is that my boss at the time told me that, this is the reason, but Vancouver didn't help. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, just everything that happened in Vancouver. And I was like, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened in Vancouver. I still don't know to this day. I know that I was at a celebration gala for our charity. I know I was at the event in the morning, but I don't know much in between there. And I just don't know. And that's not an uncommon theme in the last 3 years or 2.5 years of my drinking. So I started a new relationship with somebody that I thought was the love of my life. It was going amazing for probably the first 6 to 8 months before he cheated on me for the first time. But wanted that relationship. We were both alcoholics. We were not good for each other. There was a lot of toxicity, codependence, all sorts of stuff in our relationship. And I was going deeper and deeper and deeper into my alcoholism. I guess it would have been the fall of 2023, one of my best friends from the neighborhood, most of my friends in the neighborhood had stopped talking to me at this point. I don't really know why. Well, I'm here. I obviously know why, but I don't know exactly what I did. But one of my best friends, he's a guy, he was the father of my son's best friend. Our families used to travel on vacations together for like 10 years, like when we were couples and stuff like that. We were really, really close. And he was an alcoholic, and I knew that. And I knew he had some problems with drugs, but I thought that those were done. I mean, he was going through a separation and needed a place to stay temporarily until he found his own. And I was just around the corner from where his kids were. So I had tons of room, and it made sense for him to live with me. I also have this problem with trying to save and help everybody in my life and not put my needs first. And he very slowly started to take advantage of that. I'm stealing money, all sorts of things. And I didn't know how to get rid of him. At this time, we were by about January. My landlord at the time had said that she was moving back from Switzerland. And so she was going to take the house over, and I needed to find a new lease or a new house somewhere else. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if him and I would find a place together as friends or like what was happening. But it didn't matter because I didn't have to wait too long. He was in really, really bad shape. I came to learn within probably the last few weeks that he was there. And the weekend before, anyways, so one weekend his kids had been over. They came in and out of the house all the time. They were like my kids too. And he had been sleeping a lot that day, and they were really upset. So I was making them dinner and stuff like that. I was still sort of sober at points, or thought I was functioning. I don't even know. And then they came over on, I think it was the Tuesday or the Wednesday of that week, and I hadn't seen him. I had been at my boyfriend's at the time for a few days, and I was back, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen him. Let me go check and make sure that he's still awake so that you guys don't get upset again. I've never gone and checked on him in my entire life, and this is where I know I absolutely have a higher power, is because I went downstairs to the basement, and I found that he had hung himself in my bathroom basement, and he was dead. And it was very clear that he had been dead for a period of time. It was the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. And in that moment, all I knew was that his kids were upstairs, and I had to make it okay for them. And so I did. And I talked to his son, who I was like, you need to go home right now. I'm calling your mom. And he just looked at me, and I'm like, you need to take your younger sister and go. And they knew. I called their mom, and I called 911, and their mom came over. That was a huge loss for me. I thought that him and I would get over this together. He was the one person that really understood my addiction and really understood the way how I was trying and all of the things, and was truly one of my best friends. Seeing that, though, not even just the grief of losing him, it was more of the trauma of what I saw. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I couldn't stop seeing it. And so this was in about March of 2024. And at this point, I moved into an Airbnb because I didn't have a job and I had nowhere to live. And I started drinking. I mean, by the time that had rolled around, I was already drinking every day, all day. When I discovered the morning drink, that was the worst. And I was probably drinking about 4 bottles of wine and a Mickey of vodka a day. I would order, that was my routine order, or maybe a few coolers instead every morning. And I would just switch my Uber driver from going from this LCBO or this wine shop or this place and have the Uber people do all of the different routes. But this is the amount that I was drinking, and I was completely broken and falling apart. I couldn't afford my Airbnb anymore, so my brother said that I could go and stay with him for about a month while I tried to find a job and get my life back together. I did find a job. It was a contract, but I moved in with my brother. I got this job, was trying my best. The rule was no drinking under his roof. My niece lives there. She was only 9 at the time. And I tried, but sure enough, I was still seeing my off and on again boyfriend at the time. I was always drinking when I was there, and then I would come back and pretend that I was okay when I was at my brother's. And anyways, all of that stuff just was bad. Kicked out of my brother's house, moved to my best friend's house, got kicked out of her house, showed up my ex-boyfriend's and with all of my stuff. And that was the day of my rock bottom. I was completely out of my mind. I showed up there, and I guess there was an incident where I was taken to the hospital and I left. I remember being in an Uber coming back, but I don't remember much else. I don't remember being at the hospital. I don't remember how I left. But I do know that a few hours later that afternoon, I was still at his house and the police were there and the paramedics were there, and I was being escorted off of the property. My mom had been called, and I went to the hospital, and I finally admitted to her that I was an alcoholic and that I was out of control. And so the decision was made that I would go up to my mom's place the following week, and I'd have to stay there for at least 2 months and get sober. And by this point, I was just desperate. I was like, I need to. I had snuck in booze to the hospital. Somehow the police didn't notice that. So that helped me get through the time that I was there. And then I kept drinking in the rental that I was at for the few days until my mom could get everything organized for me to go up. And there I was, snuck more booze in there to get through the weekend because the withdrawals were so bad. I mean, I was at the point where I would be throwing up every morning and drinking, and I kept wine at my kitchen sink so that I could always chase it because I could never make it to the bathroom anymore. It was really bad. And then on September 2nd, I was forced as part of the deal with my mom to come into AA. And I found you guys it was a Monday morning, September 2nd of 2024. And the first meeting I ever attended was Solution Seekers. And it was there where I finally heard that, oh my God, maybe there's other people that actually think like me. I've thought that I'm the only one that thought like this for probably 35 years. And so I did the things. I kept coming to groups. I started going to more meetings. I was told to do 90 and 90. I think I did 120 and 90 or something like that. I got a sponsor, started doing the steps. When I first heard the words that your life has become, you're powerless over alcohol and your life has become unmanageable, I couldn't deny that. So step one for me was like, yes, learning about the fact that the first drink is the worst drink was something that I never knew. And knowing that just explains so much about so many incidents in my life. So I started working with my sponsor. I never was religious. I didn't have a higher power. I had gone to church like we're supposed to do when I was a kid for a number of years until my horseback riding was on Sundays, and then it didn't work anymore, so we stopped going to church. And my sponsor at the time was telling me all about spiritual experiences, and I was like, oh, this is hokey pokey. And this is like all of the things that people think, maybe this is a cult. Do I want this? And I was like, whatever. Here I am. I'm at my mom's. I'm probably going to drink again. I just need to be willing to try to learn how to drink like a normal person. I could do that. That was okay for me. I became willing to try. I had a spiritual experience. I became ready and willing to turn my life over to the care of my new higher power that I found. I'll never forget the moment when I was walking up at my mom's, and it was just this weirdest moment. I was just walking my dog like I did every day, and there was this power and this feeling came over me, and it was like, you need to keep walking down this corner, which I never ever do. And it was like, keep going. And I took that as sort of an analogy for life and where I was at with AA. When I got to step 4, that was probably the biggest turning point in my journey. But I didn't get to step 4 right away because I missed a big part. I joined AA on September 6th, but my sobriety date is September 2nd, but my sobriety date is October 6th. And that is because on 30 days, I thought that I was unlike any other alcoholic and I could drink like a normal person and celebrate my 30 days with a glass of wine because my mom and stepdad were out on the boat. Thought it was a great idea. And I was going to prove all of you wrong that I could do it. And some of you were on here when I was in that state, and I drank for 4 days. And it was a complete blackout. I don't remember much of it. My mom finally got a wind of it, and I had to come clean everything in their house that they had. I had poured all sorts of disgusting, like, booze that they would get on, like, all-inclusives, like, really nasty rums and stuff like that, 'cause I just didn't care. I dumped all of it while they were gone into different bottles that I had hidden in cups around my room and poured everything back with water. Like, I was 45 or 46 at the time. Who does that? I wasn't a 14 or 15-year-old. So that's when my sponsor really gave me a real sit down and was like, you realize you can't drink like a normal person. And so I went through the work. I did step 4. Step 4 for me meant putting a lot of the puzzle pieces together in my brain that had floating around that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't know how bad resentments can make somebody feel. I didn't realize how much self-pity I was holding on to, anger, just all of it. At this point, I had lost physical custody of my son. The contract job I had started at my brother's, I had got fired for being drunk on Zoom too much. Too much. Once wasn't enough. They let me do it a few more times, but everything was gone. And so step 5 and 6 were interesting for me. Step 5 was amazing for me. Sharing it with my sponsor, I felt so much in that room. I was so angry and resentful at my best friend for taking his life. I felt him in that room that day. I missed my dad so, so much. I felt him in the room that day. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've had. And so I kept going with 6 and 7 and asking, God to remove my character defects, which I had identified or thought I had got through all of them. I mean, I'm still learning that on a regular basis. And then it came time to make my amends. And writing the list was pretty straightforward because it was basically from my step 4 work. And so working through that with my sponsor, I became willing to make amends to those people. And with my family members, my mom, my brother, I was so worried. Theirs was easy. It's been ongoing with more and more conversations, but they were just like, stay sober and don't drink again, and we're good. With my son, I had the opportunity a year ago. It was about a year and a half ago at the first Christmas we were back together at, and I talked to him a lot about the fact that I had a disease, that I was sorry, all of the things that had happened. His dad had been telling him for a couple of years that drinking was my choice, that I just chose drinking over him. And that's been a hard change, even as I still work with my son on building our relationship, because he still believes that I chose alcohol over him, which I did, but I didn't do it intentionally. But the reality is I did. And I broke his trust and I made him feel unsafe. And so despite the fact that I made that amends, I'm doing step 9 every single day and making my living amends to him by talking about my program, staying sober, and just continuing to show up for him. It's not easy. It's hard. I thought our relationship would be in a better place by now. And that still gets me sometimes, but it's one day at a time. I was never able to make amends to my ex-husband. I've written them down. It's because of the contentious nature of our course, I'd been advised not to actually put anything in writing and give it to him. But I'm certainly open to having that conversation at any point in time and ready to make those if he wants to hear them. Whether or not he wants to accept them, I'd still love the opportunity to at least share them with him. And then step 10, and then I had tried to make it with my ex-boyfriend. He never, ever fully accepted my amends and some of the things that I had done during those last 6 months. And we continued to have a toxic relationship, even still to this day, even though we're not together. That's a whole other story. But, being sober gives you the opportunity to identify these things and to work on these things every single day. Step 10 is one that I try to practice every day, definitely more and more so now that I'm, almost 19 months into my sobriety. I work with my sponsor and I try to do that. I now work with others and I'm having them do that work. And I find that the harder the inventory, despite it being hard for me sometimes, I'm still learning so much from that and I need to. Step 11, prayer and meditation, was really hard for me initially because I can't sit still. I move very fast. I talk very fast. I fidget. I'm all over the place. But I started to just realize it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes sitting on a meeting and just listening and being with my higher power. I've done that a lot more lately. That's like a meditation for me. I've actually created more of a conscious effort every day after work to do some prayer and meditation, but it took me a long time to get up to that. At first, it was just saying the prayers and stuff in the meetings that I was in and working through that. But I know now without a doubt that my higher power has saved my life on more than one occasion. I know my dog has saved my life on more than one occasion. I remember one night I had passed out when I was still living at my old house. I don't know how much I'd been drinking. Like I was just drinking 24/7. And I remember I had banged my head, but I don't remember how I did it. I just know that I had big gash bump on my head, and I ended up missing some hair from there. And I had fallen asleep, and I guess my dog had been barking and crying for about half an hour, and the neighbors came to check on me. And I swear, if they hadn't woken me up that night and my dog hadn't called them, I don't think I would have made it through the night. I think I would have had a concussion or bled to death or something in my brain. I'm not sure, but I got the help I needed, and I believe that Wrigley and my higher power saved my life that night. I believe that my higher power saved my life and many other people's lives when I got behind the wheel of a car. I think my higher power saved my life by the fact that I'm here in AA and I'm still here in AA, and I'm so grateful for that. It doesn't mean that things don't get hard for me, but I can absolutely tell you on a day-to-day basis, the desire to drink has left me, and I never ever thought in my life that that would be possible. I thought that I would always have to find a way to just manage it and control it, because as long as I could do that, I would be okay. Nobody would need to know because nobody thought like me, nobody felt like me. I just needed to keep it hidden and manage it, and then that would work. But now I know that I have to share everything honestly as it comes up for me, all of the things. This program is about complete honesty. And if I want to continue to grow and I want to continue to stay sober, I need to be doing that and looking at the things that I'm not doing and the areas that I still need to work on, because sometimes the disease can creep up on me. And, they say your second year is really about my first year was 100% putting down the drink, learning to live without alcohol, learning that I can be okay socially with friends without alcohol, learning that I can do all of these things. And now it's living with the reality of what my life actually is. And when you look at the promises, so many of them have come true for me. I have an amazing job. Last summer, I had some consulting work just fall on my lap that I've dreamed of doing for many, many years. My relationship with my son is better than it's been in a long time. It's not perfect by any means. It's not where I want it to be, but we are in communication more days than not. And the times that we are together, each time feels better. And I can feel that, and I can see that in his face too. It's working this program, but when those things don't go well, there's been some dark times where it shocks me how much my disease can take over my brain. I can feel the cloud just cover it, and it will try to tell me that just having one bottle of wine, I don't even go with one drink. I got to start with a bottle. Just having a bottle of wine will help me through that one night. Nobody will know. I can just do that. But I can't, because I will know. And I know that my self-pity and my resentments and my hatred of myself is what drive me to drink in the first place, and that would only push me further down. And so I can't. And I have to come back to the program. I have to be of service. I have to share with others. I have to connect with other people in the program. I have to read the big book. I have to talk to my higher power. I have to work with my sponsor. There was this one, actually, let me pull this out. There's one paragraph that I was reading yesterday that just reminded me so much of what my drinking was. And it's on page 297 of The Housewife Who Drank at Home. And it says, "I never knew which came first, the thinking or the drinking. If I could only stop thinking, I wouldn't drink. If I could only stop drinking, maybe I wouldn't think. But they were all mixed up together, and I was all mixed up inside. And yet I had to have that drink. The deteriorating effects, the disintegrating effects of," I wasn't planning on reading this, so I don't have my reading glasses. Okay. "And yet I have to have that drink. The deteriorating effects, that disintegrating effects of chronic wine drinking. I cared nothing about my personal appearance. I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't care what I did. To me, taking a bath was just being in a place with a bottle where I could drink in privacy. I had to have it with me at night in case I woke up and needed that drink." And that was certainly true for me. I couldn't get through a night without drinking. And now I sleep well. I get up. I see you guys. I take care of myself. I do the things I need to do. And it's a one day at a time, and it still very much is for me. And there's probably so much more I should have said or shared, but that's all I've got today. And I'm just really grateful to be here, and hope that some of the things that I shared in my story help some of you. So thank you.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to enjoy a shot glass of recovery. If you'd like to help support the show, you can make a voluntary contribution through PayPal at A Shot Glass of Recovery. Every donation, no matter the amount, helps cover the costs of producing the podcast and allows us to keep sharing stories of hope and recovery. Thanks again for your support. It truly means a lot.
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.